Israel is at war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way. But though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it, slaughtering families in their homes, massacring hundreds of young people, kidnapping scores of women, children, and elderly. They are savages. Hamas is ISIS. And just as the forces of civilizations united to defeat ISIS, the forces of civilization must support Israel in defeating Hamas. I want to thank President Biden for his unequivocal support. I want to thank leaders across the world who are standing with Israel today. I want to thank the people and Congress of the United States of America.
My name is Mazen Mukhtar. I'm 55 years old, and I'm the CEO of Baytul Mal, Humanitarian Relief Organization.
Mazen, thank you for being with me today.
Thank you.
So, you are the founder of Baytul Mal,
No, I'm just a CEO.
the CEO of Baytul Mal.
Yes.
How many countries is Baytul Mal operating in right now?
We've worked in the last 4 years in 24 countries. We work in about 18, 19 countries throughout the year, and others occasionally when there's a need or a special event.
And what would you say right now is the conflict zone that has the most need for aid?
Obviously, right now it is Gaza, Palestine in general, because people might not be aware there is some violence in the West Bank as well. Uh, so Palestine is the most needy conflict zone at this moment.
And when did Baytul Mal first provide aid to Palestine?
Oh, we've been working in Palestine since 2003.
In both the West Bank and Gaza?
Yeah, we started off in the West Bank. I don't know exactly, it was before my time when we started working in Gaza as well, but we started in the West Bank in 2003 while we were getting incorporated. We're officially incorporated in 2004. This is our 20th year now. So,
Congratulations.
thank you. And we started off primarily focusing on the West Bank.
So, what is the current human condition of the average Palestinian in Gaza, and what is the state of the Gazan population, civilian population as a whole?
I mean, there is, as you can imagine, it's a horrible situation. It is, as has been described repeatedly, before the war, the world's biggest open air prison. But with the war right now, the situation is terrible. Most people are displaced, internally displaced within Gaza. And most people live. So Gaza is 5 districts, 5 parts. So you have Rafah in the south, you have Khan Yunis north of that, you have central district or Deir al-Balah, then you have Gaza, and then you have northern Gaza. And the war started in Gaza and northern Gaza. So people started moving from the northern part close to the southern parts. And now the war has spread throughout most of Gaza. It's no longer what part has been spared. It's more like what part has been more destroyed than another part. The living situation before was very difficult because the people of Gaza have been living under a continuous blockade for a couple of decades now, by land, by air, by sea, and very few things are allowed in. Many of them depended on the Israeli economy for their jobs. They literally worked in. They would cross the border and work. The same applies, by the way, to the people in the West Bank. And with the situation right now, that has been cut off. So many people have been cut off from their source of making a living, their jobs. In addition to this, there was a total blockade for the first 5 or 6 weeks of this particular war. And then after that, it became a partial, so nothing was going in or out. And then after that, the Rafah crossing was opened. But right now, people are suffering, well, there's death because of the bombing. There are the injured, who are more than those who have died. Now, the people who are lost, presumed dead under the rubble. So, like the official people, number of people who have died is about 30,000. But there is another maybe 15 or 20,000 in addition to those who are lost and are presumed dead. There is a greater number of that are injured. And as you can see in the newspapers, they're right now under threat of famine. So the situation really deserves for the international community to come together to help these people.
So, can you, and we'll get to the blocking of the aid later,
Yeah.
but can you speak a little bit about the housing situation right now, where people are currently staying, how many people are staying in small areas, sharing apartments?
Oh, so you have situations where you have 30 and 35 people sharing one apartment. You would have multiple families who are sharing an apartment, and they would sometimes, in some situations, take shifts sleeping because there's enough space for everyone. So Gaza has 2.3 million people, 2.2, 2.3 million people. And right now, because of the massive destruction that has happened in the Gaza city, which is the most important city in Gaza and northern Gaza, many of them have moved south. So many people are staying with family or with friends, sharing apartments, making it really not sustainable on the long term. There are right now successful attempts to build camps and refugee camps and tent cities. The problem is that the numbers are nowhere near what is needed. So we're talking about things, building tents in the tens of thousands when the people who have been displaced are in the hundreds of thousands. So it's a small minority of the people who have been displaced who are able to find secondary accommodations. Let's call it that. Complicating things is that when things get quiet in a certain city or village, the Israelis are preventing those people who have been displaced to the south from going back to the north. So even if your home has not been destroyed, you're right now prevented from going to the north and going back to your home during the peaceful periods. So it's challenging to say the least, and frankly, I'm using understated words. The situation is horrible, and the world needs to know that these people are being choked to death. This, and I mean it with the full meaning of the word, is a modern Holocaust. They are being bombed, they are being starved. Any material that could possibly have dual use is prevented from coming in. Construction material is prevented. Much equipment is
Dual use
prevented.
meaning potentially can be used
Yes,
for
it could be
several
dismantled, and
purposes.
some parts of it could possibly be used to help in some way to develop a weapon. Metal materials are not allowed in. Building materials are not allowed in. Building equipment is, of course, forget about it.
So, across all the conflict zones that you've been to, so that includes Ukraine, Yemen,
Yes,
this is the worst you've seen in
this is
living in this?
absolutely the worst. Now, this is not to make light of other places. So one must be careful because the suffering of one people should not be used to make light of the suffering of another. What happened in Yemen was very, very bad. The majority of people of Yemen had to be displaced. A very large number of Yemeni children were killed, not to mention Yemeni people in general. And I'm not basically saying that if you're an adult, your life is worth less, but the situation in Yemen was horrible. Situation in Ukraine is very bad. I have less experience in that than the others, but we did deliver aid in Ukraine multiple times, and I was physically, personally present at the border, the Romanian side, border with Ukraine, about a week and a half after the war broke, and the situation was very bad. So nothing I say about Gaza should in any way make light of the suffering of people elsewhere. And I think if we believe in humanity and we believe that we have rights, duties toward one another, and other people who suffer have rights over us, then we should be there for them everywhere. One of the things we made sure of in Baitul Mal is, as we are focused on Gaza, not to forget that not long ago we had the floods in Libya, so the aid continues to flow. And a few days before that, we had the earthquake in Morocco. And not long before that, we had the earthquake in Afghanistan.
And the bombing in Lebanon.
And the bombing in Lebanon, which was very carefully timed while everybody's focused on what's happening in Afghanistan. Sorry, I confused two things. There was a bombing in Syria right after the earthquake in Afghanistan. There's bombing in Lebanon right now. It is, again, not to make light of it, it is limited in scope. The Israelis have promised a few days ago, or said a few days ago, that they are preparing for open conflict. So we are internally in Beit al-Mal preparing for that possibility. So we have two contingencies. We have a contingency for the escalation of conflict in the West Bank and a contingency for the escalation of conflict in Lebanon. And actually, throughout the last few days, we've been in constant communication about what would we do in Lebanon if need be. The good news is that they have been, you know, strong talk like this every now and then. So we hope that this is just talk that is not backed by a real war.
And just for clarification, how many people do you have working in Gaza, and how many do you have in the West Bank? Or how many connections do you have there?
We have quite a few. Um, we have in the West Bank, we have maybe a dozen people or so. It's very hard to count because there are people who are transient. So there are people that you hire per project, and there are people that you have. So basically, at a given time, you have somewhere between a dozen and 2 dozen people in the West Bank, and you have more than that currently in Gaza. Most of them are transient. We actually had staff, permanent staff in Gaza. None of our staff was killed. Some were injured. Our primary staffer, about 20 people from his family were killed, from his wife's family, were killed in 2 separate bombings. He himself was injured, but in a minor way, and he's now present in the United States. But you know, thank God we haven't lost anybody, and we haven't had any of our staff injured in a major way.
Okay. So let's move on to starvation and sanitation.
Yeah.
How much food is needed on a day-to-day basis in Gaza, optimally?
You have to feed 2 million people. So you can imagine that. We, with our capacity. So one thing that should be clear for anybody who's listening to this, whenever there is man-made conflict, wars, basically, the ability and the capacity of humanitarian aid organizations is limited. There's only so much we can do. So our hope is to be able to help as many people as possible. The scale of destruction is in the level of the millions, and the scale of the aid is in the level of the hundreds of thousands. And I'm talking about the humanitarian aid organizations, working together, sometimes individually, sometimes in concert. That was a problem also in Yemen. It's if you see it from the perspective of how much of the total conflict can I address, it's heart-wrenching. Not just because you can only help a limited percentage of the people who need aid, but also because you build and somebody else is bombing. So you're trying to. This is not a natural disaster. This is a situation where you have people who are suffering, and you have somebody who's inflicting that suffering. So no matter how much aid you're helping, 10,000 families have food, and at the same time, in one day, you hear that 100 people were killed. So that's part of the challenge. If you see it this way, it's heartbreaking. But on the other side, you see it a different way. You say, well, I was able to help 10,000 people who otherwise would not be able to help. And that led, in all probability, life is in the hand of God, but in all probability, helped save many of those lives who would have died. So this is a good thing that you are able to do. People who otherwise would die, you're able to help them. From that perspective, I feel grateful and I feel privileged to have the opportunity to help, because all of my life I would watch news and I would feel helpless, whatever would happen. And working in this industry, I find myself in a very different situation. I watch the news and something bad happens, and I think to myself, maybe we can help.
How many hospitals are left right now in Gaza?
Gaza had 36 hospitals to begin with. All of them were bombed. You have 12 operating partially. So that's a third capacity. Most of them, as you can imagine, in the south. No hospital was spared. That's an unfortunate thing, and you know very well what happened to Al Shifa Hospital and others. But that's the situation.
So let's move on to the blocking of aid.
Yes.
How has access of aid trucks into Gaza shifted prior to October 7th, 2023, subsequently after that attack, and currently in 2024?
So Gaza has been under an effective blockade for a couple decades now. There are only a few crossings. If I remember correctly, there is Rafah crossing, of course, the most famous one. There is Karm Abu Salim, which has been opened recently. So Rafah is Israeli controlled. Karm Abu Salim is, sorry, Rafah is Egyptian controlled. Karm Abu Salim is Israeli controlled. There is Salah ad-Din crossing. There is Erez crossing. I think I'm missing one. In the first before the war. So Israel was under a total blockade. Nothing could come by air or by sea, and nothing could come except through those crossings. And there was an understanding between the Egyptian authorities and the Israeli authorities about what would be allowed through the Rafah crossing, the major crossing. After the October 7th, there was a total blockade for about, I want to say, 6 weeks. During which time, because we had staff on the ground, the second day after the war, by October 8th, we were able to start distributing aid. We would get aid either from warehouses or purchased in the market in the south, like in the city of Rafah and Khan Yunis, and distribute in the north. So we didn't waste time. It took us about a day and a half, under 2 days. We were distributing aid. And that continued, but approximately 4 weeks into the war, there was an announcement that the Rafah crossing would be opened. It took 2 weeks for it to actually open, during which time we worked really diligently and we established the connections needed so that we would deliver aid into Gaza through the Rafah crossing. Uh, Things take a long time, and there's a lot of connections and paperwork that have to be done, but we were able to send convoys. We sent a convoy in December, another one in January, another one in February, another one in March, and now just recently one in April.
What does the convoy consist of?
We have delivered total uh, 819 tons of aid. By weight, most of it was food, non-perishable. There was also food boxes, individual food boxes that a family would use for about a month with things such as oil, staples. There are also oil, beans, rice, lots of wheat flour, and other like chickpeas used for hummus and other things, so that they can cook and they can eat.
Has there been an issue with the amount of like flour and yeast that's been delivered that hasn't been able to be used?
We haven't had that issue. So, okay, this is war, all right, with all the ugliness of war and all the chaos of war. So we were fortunate. Our 4 convoys were delivered and our other aid was delivered, but it takes a long time. So the way we deliver aid, we can't go into Gaza. We prepare our trucks, we send them to Al Arish in Sinai, not too far from Gaza. And then we hand it over to the Egyptian Red Crescent. The Egyptian Red Crescent hands it over to the Palestinian Red Crescent. And the Palestinian Red Crescent would hand it over to us. And then we would distribute it. This process is complicated. This process takes forever. Not all organizations were able to do it. Some organizations were too small to be able to do it. Some organizations, for one reason or another, even though they're big, they were somehow flagged by the either Israelis or the Egyptians or the Palestinians, and they were not able to do it. We were among the organizations who have been consistently able to do it. We established a connection to both the Egyptian and the Palestinian Red Crescent right away. There is another path through UNRWA, which we did not use. There's a third path, which is through international aid delivered by countries. So you're able to deliver aid through Qatar, through Pakistan, through Turkey, and through Jordan. They would deliver aid in large amounts, and it's possible to make an agreement with them that you would send your aid with them. So these are the three different ways to deliver the aid. Uh, Most of the aid we delivered was through Egyptian and then Palestinian Red Crescent, and we distributed in the end. It ended up working for us, but you should be aware convoys have been bombed, not ours. Aid workers have been shot at, not ours. We're very fortunate this way. Aid has been stolen. People ask, by the way, about stolen aid. This is a big problem because right now there's
Just
lack
to
of security.
clarify, that
Yes.
stolen aid by Hamas. That's the claim, right?
No.
What claim are you
No,
referring
no, no, no. So Hamas guarantees the aid because they want the aid to continue to flow. So the issue is that right now, because of the bombing, there are areas. So when you say Hamas, we mean two different things. On one side, you can think of Hamas as a an organization involved in a military conflict, but Hamas also happens to be a political party that was elected in Gaza, and they are the current government in Gaza. We don't deal with either of them. We don't deal with this Hamas. We don't deal with that Hamas. Zero dealings. But what happens is that the local government in Gaza is very interested in the aid flowing and continuing to flow. So Hamas actually has people who secure the aid trucks. Because of the bombing, there are places where they cannot go because the Israelis have literally promised to bomb anybody who's Hamas, kill anybody who's Hamas. So the security forces that is securing the aid delivery trucks itself sometimes cannot go to certain areas. At that point, you are liable to be attacked by robbers. So your truck can be hijacked. So because we don't send aid directly ourselves, there's only one case where one of our aid deliveries was misplaced, let's say, and we were able to recover it.
How were you able to recover it?
It was not stolen by robbers. But on somewhere along the line of the handover from the Egyptian Red Crescent to the Palestinian Red Crescent, there was a mistake, and our aid was ended up being delivered to UNRWA instead of being delivered to us, and our staff on the ground was able to recover it. So that's the hiccup that we've experienced.
Do you coordinate at all with the Israeli government?
No. And by the way, no individual organizations that are going through Egypt do this. Usually, the coordination is done by UNRWA, by PCRS, the peacekeeping forces, by World Food Program, by the Palestinian Red Crescent. So these are the ones who actually transport it in. But we don't have any coordination with the Israelis at all.
And
But we do have coordination with the Egyptian authorities.
okay. Are you and UNRWA? So you said previously you're all working through different ports of entry,
Yeah.
right? And yours is through Egypt at
The majority, yeah,
the southern border next to Rafah.
correct.
And that's been consistent since October.
The majority of the aid we delivered was through Rafah, absolutely.
And has Egypt aided you or hindered you in delivering aid?
It's a very interesting question, actually. So, Egypt as a country with a government that has a complex relationship with the Israelis, with the Palestinians, and the Palestinians, be it the Palestinian National Authority or Hamas government in Gaza. There is always it's a complex relationship, and sometimes by national policy things are easier or things are more difficult. However, what we have found on the ground in dealing with the Egyptian authorities at every level of the Egyptian government, we have found people are helpful at every level of the Egyptian civil society because we source things in Egypt. So we have had vendors who refuse to get paid. We have had people who charge us peanuts, even by Egyptian standards. Egyptian cost of living is lower than the United States, but even by Egyptian standards, who have charged us peanuts. We have people who have eased things for us. So that was a pleasant thing. And there's also, like in every place, there's a level of corruption as well that we had to deal with in Egypt, in Jordan, in even with the Palestinian National Authority. We had to deal with that. Somehow, with the advent of the conflict, it seems that the level of corruption that we have dealt with, I'm only talking about um, we found helpful people. The fact that we were able to set up a network and be able to deliver aid in December, that itself was a feat, and it wouldn't have happened had officials just decided to be difficult. because a lot of decisions is one or two officials feeling that how they feel about you.
So before we move on to the risk of the aid workers and journalists, as aid is going from Egypt to Palestine, do you have a situation where a lot of people are trying to come from Palestine into Egypt over that same crossing?
So there are two different gates, two different places. One for people, one for cars and trucks. Sorry, one for people and cars, and one for trucks. So we deal with the trucks part. We know there is a large number of people who want to cross, and we know, I'll say unfortunately, that the Egyptian authorities are not allowing people to come across. You don't want a rush of 2 million people coming in, but at the same time, there are cases where people really need to cross for legitimate reasons. So the person that who our staffer who's now in the United States was only able to leave because he's a U.S. citizen, U.S. born.
And he was seriously injured?
No, he was not injured seriously. He was injured, but not seriously. His wife's family, unfortunately, a large part of them were wiped out.
Were they all in one house
Yes,
together and they were all bombed
they
together?
were all bombed together, and 20 some people died. All
No connection to Hamas.
no, no. They're that particular family is let's say on the opposite side of the political spectrum.
So with that, let's take a quick break and we'll be
Right.
right back.
Thank you.
From our break. So let's move on to the circumvention of the blocking of aid and the loss of aid workers and journalists. What tactics, if any, has Beitul Mal used to expedite, bypass, or circumvent the blocking of food, water, shelter supplies, and medical supplies?
So we do not circumvent the blockade at all. As a humanitarian aid organization, we we are interested in the aid continuing to flow. We're not interested in doing one adventure and then delivering aid once and then being prevented from ever delivering aid again. Everything we do is checked with the proper authorities. In particular, we deal most closely with the Egyptian authorities at this time. All of the aid that we do is inspected. We give accurate reports on everything we deliver. What we do though is we look for every avenue to deliver the aid. So right now we are delivering aid through the Rafah crossing. We partner with another organization to deliver medical aid through an aid delivery that's coming from Pakistan. All on the books, all clear and everything. But we look, here's another avenue. The United States right now is building a temporary port by Gaza for whatever reason. We're exploring, well, is this something we could use to deliver aid? Because by ship, you can deliver a whole lot more aid.
That's the intention of the port in the first place, right? Was for aid delivery?
That's the declared intention
That's
of
the
the port.
declared intention.
That's the declared intention of the port, yeah. And I'll leave it at that. Okay. But it will be used for that too. So,
And just for clarification, that's what's the status of that construction?
so they announced it last month. To the best of my knowledge, they started working on that about 3 weeks ago. My numbers might be off. My dates might be off. It's supposed to take about 60 days to complete, 60 to 90 days to complete. I don't know how long the Palestinians can wait, but I'll take it. If it's going to help deliver aid, I'll use it. So we're still exploring what can be done there. We may or may not be able to use it, but we look for every avenue for delivery of aid. One of our principles in Beit al-Mal, nothing is done under the table. There's no sneaking anything. There's no somebody's dying. If you just sneak this, it'll save a life. No, it will jeopardize a life. So we don't do it, and I think this has served us well. One of the reasons why we were not banned from working in Palestine is that everything we do is clear and open.
So the UN has publicly stated that over 200 aid workers have been killed. 142 from UNRWA specifically. Recently saw 7 more in the World Central Kitchen attack.
Yeah.
So firstly, is there any sense of camaraderie amongst these aid organizations, and to what extent are you all working together?
Definitely. So, in a conflict zone like this, it's very common for several organizations to work together. Uh, we definitely, so we benefited when we were delivering aid in the early days from not just our warehouses, but the warehouse of other organizations to get the aid and distribute it. We have partners in Egypt who help us from sourcing to distribution to transportation. This is, I'm not talking about the Egyptian Red Crescent, I'm saying local organizations. In the United States, we are part of the American Muslim Humanitarian Forum, which brings together faith based organizations. We are part of Interaction, which brings humanitarian organizations or nonprofits that are not necessarily faith based, both faith based and non faith based. We are currently delivering medical aid. We don't specialize in medical aid. We specialize in medical supplies, but when it comes to medicine, we don't specialize in this. So we are cooperating with Imana, a medical association. So that's necessary. It's par for the course. That's normally how you would do it. Some organizations are large enough to be able to do a lot by themselves. We have grown in the last few years to be able to do many things by ourselves, but we definitely like to cooperate with others, especially those who have a specialty. We are planning right now a medical mission. We don't have physicians.
A
That's
medical mission meaning
physicians physically going into Gaza. So we're working on that.
and setting up their own, tent-based facility because all the hospitals are destroyed, or
Well,
trying
not all the
to.
hospitals are destroyed. Some of them are damaged.
Okay.
So you'll be able to work in hospitals.
Okay.
But when you go in the field, so
Is this in conjunction with Doctors Without Borders? Or is this...
we haven't worked with Doctors Without Borders specifically, but we have worked with Imana, which is a medical association. There are two organizations that we have worked with. We have cooperated with, like one organization we worked with is United Hands Relief, United Mission Relief, that we just cooperated with recently. Another organization called Zakat Foundation, based in Chicago, an excellent organization, delivers aid throughout the world. So we do have that sense of work. We have a bigger goal. We don't see each other primarily as rivals. We see each other as cooperating, a team, cooperating and delivering aid to an area that has a much bigger need than anyone can deliver.
So a lot of the violence that we've seen has happened at the point of distribution of aid.
Yeah.
So, what can you comment on your distribution points, protecting the civilians that are trying to receive the aid,
Yes.
and what targeting there's been?
It appears, and right now, part of what I'm saying is not based on, I try to be very fact based. What I'm about to say is based on my understanding, because I don't have the facts. It appears that it is really the largest, most visible distribution points that are targeted. We're talking about UNRWA or one of those. We haven't had any of our distribution points attacked, but even though we're not a small organization, we're not at the scale of UNRWA that by itself is delivering half the aid. Yeah,
Right.
so we're not anywhere in that scale. We deliver in the millions. They deliver in the tens of millions or more. So we have not been targeted. And it seems like and again I say seems like a consistent pattern. It's really the most visible targets that are attacked. It's almost like there's a message being delivered. We're letting you deliver aid, but we don't really want too much aid to be delivered. We're letting you deliver medical help. We don't really want it too much. That appears to be the message.
What about the aid drops from the sky? There
Or
was
the
a
ones that
story
killed a couple people.
Yeah, there was a story that 5 people died, and there's
Yes.
another story that other people drowned trying to retrieve them
Yes.
from the sea in two separate
Both
occasions.
true.
Who is that aid coming from? What was the decision to do it like that?
Look, the United States is dropping the aid. I cannot speak for why that is those done like that. Why not deliver it? But by I don't know why this was
It
deemed the
seems
best
like
thing.
every place except the border crossings are what the U.S. is trying to deliver aid through, right? By sea, by air.
So the one good thing, for example, that that aid delivery has done, it has a secondary effect that has been positive, which is an implicit an implicit break of the implicit blockade. basically saying this blockade is not rock solid. In that way, it's been positive. Not the most efficient way to deliver aid, but some aid is better than no aid, and aid is needed. They did deliver a modest amount of aid, not a huge amount. So it appears to me to be more symbolic than anything else. But, I am grateful for any aid that comes in.
And just the last point on this, what would be your recommendation to UNRWA, to World Central Kitchen, on how to protect their aid workers?
Uh, yeah, I'm sure they have their own advisors. But I think two things we need to do, and I'm going to include myself. Instead of me giving advice to other organizations, I'm going to basically give them and ourselves. I think the two things that are very helpful is increased collaboration and cooperation among the organizations, and increased visibility, and I'm talking about media visibility, to really talk about what is happening. Not simply complaining about a bombing here or there, just for people to be aware. Aid is being delivered. Aid has been delivered. It's important for there to be a safe corridor. Safe corridor should not be attacked. This place has been attacked. So every now and then the message would be we shouldn't be attacked, and we were attacked. But also a lot of it is how crucially, how vital it is for this aid to continue to flow. Because frankly, without that aid continuing to flow, many, many people will die. And there are other fates than death. There are people who end up in starvation, who might not die. There are people who are injured. There are people who don't have access to medicine, and they end up with a permanent disability instead of something that can be treated early on.
Have you seen, well, actually, I've even seen from the footage, a lot of people with uh, conditions where they have had a leg amputated or they've been completely burned, where they still need more surgeries and more care, and the care that they've been delivered was not sufficient.
This is like, yes, this is sadly the situation with tens of thousands of people.
We don't
This
see those numbers.
No. This is very, very widespread. People are operated on with the most basic conditions. We've all heard the story, without anesthetic. Yeah, without anesthetic, without the proper medicine too. So without a proper tool, any knife will do.
There's actually been stories of surgeons crafting their own
Yes.
tools to use, right?
Yes. Look, the tool is not available, and you have a case in front of you. Somebody's gonna die. You're gonna do it as if it's available. If what's available is a spoon, you'll use a spoon. If what's available is one syringe, a big syringe, you'll use that.
Um, so you have children who have lost limbs. I'm going to
Yes.
talk just about the injury now. Death
Yes.
aside. Those who have been dug up from rubble after days, those who have had their faces completely burned off. What about the white phosphorus?
Yes.
What effect have you seen from that?
So it sticks to you, and I don't know if you've ever had a plastic burn. All right. So if you're burning plastic and you touch it, it sticks to you like gum. And then it continues to burn while it sticks to you. That's the problem with it. So you can't just like brush it off.
Right.
So
There's no duck and roll.
there's no, yes. So it continues to burn for a long time, and it has a very, very deep effect. And that's why it is internationally banned. But of course, they seem to be selectively enforced. But I want to comment a little bit about those injuries. We shouldn't focus only about the deaths. 35,000 people have died. We're now getting closer and closer to 2% of the population being killed. They're being decimated. But then there are the injuries, and there's a psychological damage. These are people who are orphaned. These are people who have been separated from their parents, and they were too young to know who their parents are. They are the baby. You've heard of the babies in incubators people were forced to leave, and then when they came back, they were rotting bodies because they were abandoned. So this is now, unfortunately, the very common situation in Gaza. You are injured, you have no access to proper medical aid, even though proper medical aid can be made accessible. And you could recover either fully or with scars. But it's not made available. And as a result, you have an amputation instead of an internal fixation. Right? You lose a leg, you lose a limb, you lose. That is very common in Palestine, and I want your audience to be aware that there is massive damage that is happening to the survivors. So people are displaced, homes are destroyed, so they have no place to go to. Food is not available, so they are starving. Bombing is happening, so they're being injured and killed, and medical is not being made available, so they end up suffering because of that. This is a horrendous situation.
While living in tents during a particularly seems like it's been raining a lot as well.
Yes.
No
So
running water,
fortunately,
no
we haven't
electricity.
had. Oh, I'm not aware that they had snow in that area this year, and they usually don't get snow. It's still cold, still a cold winter, and those who made it through.
It's been through the whole winter.
Yes,
Entire conflict.
yes. Now there are some people incredibly resilient. Part of the message we hear is how resilient they are, and it's very, very true. It's like I myself, I'm just taken aback. It's surreal how much faith these people have, how much resilience they have. But at the same time, humans are humans. It's not like they're all a block of ice and they care. But maybe they have strength, they're able to overcome the death of their children. But they care and they suffer and they grieve and they cry. And they want safety and they want to be able to laugh and they want to be able to have a wedding and a birthday party and they want to be able to buy candy for the children. They want to have normal lives. Okay, these are not, they are somehow portrayed as, they're not seen as human. They are numbers. They are the Palestinians are something else. So we seem to care about people in many places. Why does it have to be seven, eight workers who make the world wake up? What about seven people, human people, who are not aid workers, who have the right to live? Are they less worthy of attention? So I'm glad that attention is given in this case, but I wish more attention were given to this situation.
I'd like you to tie together the raised awareness after the 7 foreign
Yes.
workers from World Central Kitchen were killed. Combine that with the use and controversy of the term human shields.
Yes.
To what extent has this been used to dehumanize Arabs, Palestinians, Muslims?
Yes. Uh, okay. So uh, let me start with the human shields issue. We haven't seen that has happened. Obviously, this is the most concentrated human population on Earth. So it's not like you can go 15 miles away from all human population and then somehow do operations from there. So I think it is part of the disinformation campaign to basically every time they attack civilians, they say, "Oh, because they're being used as human shields." I invite your audience. I'm not going to do it myself, but I invite your audience to research who provenly has used human shields. Look, literally has taken human civilians and put them in front of tanks as they're moving. So your audience can research that. But within this conflicts, we haven't seen those human shields. We have seen a massive disinformation campaign. The decapitated babies turned out to be disinformation. The raped women turned out to be disinformation. The I don't know children who put in the oven turned out to be disinformation.
The burning of setting people on fire, tying them back to back.
Yes, turned out to be disinformation. The Shifa hospital, this whole bunker under Shifa, turned out to be disinformation.
Right. So from all your contacts in Gaza, there have been no sightings or no proof or evidence of Hamas working in hospitals?
No.
So what does this hypocrisy point out to you? What do you make of that hypocrisy?
I think we are the victims of a massive disinformation campaign that is humanizing one group of people and dehumanizing another. I think humanizing the one group of people is a wonderful thing and should continue to happen. We shouldn't flip it, but we should learn to humanize people equally. You cannot exterminate a people without dehumanizing them first. And I think this has happened and has happened consistently for decades. And I think this is evil. And again, with the full meaning of the word evil. And we should not allow it to happen. We don't allow people socially. We don't allow people to walk around and somehow racially insult people because of their background or their race and say that we don't allow that. And as a society, not as laws, as a society, we find that this is beneath us. And we won't even let a person finish their speech if they continue going too far down that road. We might tolerate a sentence here or there, but not more than that. And the same thing with different forms of bigotry when it's open bigotry. But somehow, when it comes to Palestinian people, there's an exception. We shouldn't allow that exception. We should stand up for them. They are human beings who have the same right to life with the same love of their children as everybody, as you and I. And their children are not somehow less precious. Their lives are not less precious. Their hopes and dreams and desire to have a good life and a house and a home and a car and live a normal life in peace is not less precious than my desire and yours.
Some might say, to play devil's advocate, Israel has a right to defend itself.
Yes, some might say that. So I'm not going to answer that particular statement, but I will make a statement that if a person comes into my home and kills two of my children and I have four, I'm protecting them, in the process of protecting them I attack that person, they do not have the right to defend themselves. The aggressor does not have a right to defend themselves. I am not making a statement right now one way or another about the rest of the territories, but at least within a territory that Israel itself has recognized as separate from itself, Gaza, they do not have the right to defend themselves in that place. They do not have the right to take the land of the Palestinians. Now, I realize what I'm saying is a political statement here, and I'm focused on the humanitarian aid. But my focus here is that this statement is used to justify the extermination of a people. Those 35,000 people, 35,000 people have died, not to count the people who are lost under the rubble. They, this claim of right to defend oneself was used as a cover for that. And let's assume for a second that the Israelis have a right to defend themselves, full right. Let's take 100% Netanyahu's narrative, not even the Israeli narrative, Netanyahu's far right wing narrative. Let's take that. The Israelis have all the right to all the land in all of Palestine, including all of Gaza. Hamas has zero right. All Hamas people associated with Hamas should be exterminated. Let's accept that as a premise. How does that justify the tens of thousands of people, innocent people, civilians who have been killed? Now, you would say there are collateral damage. So I ask you, if Hamas people were hiding in Tel Aviv, would they bomb Tel Aviv? Would they kill 35,000 Jewish people in Tel Aviv? Clearly, no. So clearly, there's a double standard. Clearly, there's one civilian life that is worth more than another civilian life. So I am not calling here for anything more than at least the people who are not involved in the conflict. Don't go and target them.
Let's take a quick break.
All right.
All right, we're back from our break. Thank you, Mezen.
Thank you.
So in the past few days, or maybe I should say weeks, the UN Security Council has finally passed a ceasefire resolution, the United States abstaining from the vote.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been some news that IDF soldiers have withdrawn from southern Gaza. The IDF posted about the loss of 4 soldiers recently. And the White House has seemingly changed their position after the World Central Kitchen attack. Is the ceasefire achieved yet?
No, not yet. I hope it gets achieved. Just to be clear, the Israeli soldiers, according to the Israeli government, are redeploying. They're withdrawing from one part so that they can prepare for an attack in Rafah, which I hope doesn't happen. Sometimes there are threats that are not followed through. It would make me very happy for this threat not to be followed through. So far, we don't have a ceasefire. I would love to see an actual permanent ceasefire. I would love to see those, finger biting negotiations come to an end and for there to be peace in the area. But that is still a way away. You talked about the UN resolution. It's all in the enforcement. It's all about the enforcement. You could have a ceasefire without a resolution, and you can have a resolution without a ceasefire. So I'm, it has good symbolic value. I'm very happy about the symbolic value of the resolution. But I don't look at that. I look at what's happening on the ground.
Would you say the same is true for the ICJ case?
Um, yeah, it's all about the enforcement. The ICJ case, by the way, was helpful, was useful. It didn't achieve, many people had unrealistic hopes for that, but it did achieve something. It put a pin on the ground, claiming that what is happening is, at the very least, the most liberal reading of this is that it is a threat of extermination or threat of genocide.
Plausible genocide, I think, is one of
Yes,
the words they use.
yes, that's it. So it is helpful, and I am grateful for the UN resolutions. I am grateful for the ICJ case. Just it doesn't do what people hope it does.
So, assuming hypothetically, let's say tomorrow Gaza became completely safe for aid to enter and the IDF was
Yes.
completely withdrawn, blockade
Yes.
completely removed, open border to cross from Rafah, what would be your first actions to rehabilitate the population and infrastructure?
It would make us so happy. There is so much rebuilding to be done. There is so much orphans to be taken care of, food to be delivered, destroyed homes to be rebuilt. There's massive work to be done at that point, but it's going to be happy work. See, at some point, you're working in the middle of shelling, and it's heartbreaking. But that's not going to be heartbreaking anymore. The heartbreak would have still be, in our rear view mirror, but it would be a very hopeful thing because you're building something and you have real expectations won't be destroyed tomorrow. At one point, we were talking about doing warehouses in certain places. We said, well, what's the point? They're going to be destroyed in any moment. So that will be a very, very good step for the Palestinian people. I don't want to see people killed. I don't want to see Palestinians killed. I don't want to see Israelis killed. I don't want to see anybody killed. Even in the conflict of Ukraine, where the Russians even, I don't want to see Ukrainians killed. I don't want to see Russians killed. So if we got to the point of that peace, it will make me very happy, and we will have a new phase of our work. It'll be a whole other new set of programs. It will be uh, an opportunity to build something that's worthwhile. Imagine taking one of the damaged or destroyed hospitals and just rehabilitating and rebuilding it from scratch. Big, massive project. It could cost millions, but in the end, it has a huge impact on the people in that area.
So your function as an aid organization, other aid organizations, switches from wartime to peacetime.
Yes. So whenever you have a situation like this, you have phases. The first phase is emergency response. The next phase is sustainability, providing food and water and basics. Like one of the things we provide is, in addition to the food we deliver tents with mats, mattresses, and uh, and, uh, and covers. We provide hygiene kits, but now, because that's needed at at the moment for just sustainability. So emergency response, sustainability. But then again, this phase after that is breaking the cycle of poverty, allowing people to go out of needing to live in a tent to live in something a little bit more permanent, assuming that it becomes permitted by basically the limitations from Egypt and from the Israelis and the Palestinians. Building homes, providing permanent water. Like we had hundreds of tanks in Palestine, and we would desalinate the water with desalination plants, and we would have fresh water delivered twice a month or every 2 weeks, actually, to our hundreds of water tanks. Most of them are destroyed now. We would rebuild the water tanks, provide fresh water.
Have you received any funding from the U.S. government at all?
No.
So it's been completely donations?
Yes.
Okay. So every masjid or mosque, every school has been destroyed, graveyards have been dug up, roads have been cleared,
Yeah.
and to quote Israel, the lawn has been mowed.
Yes.
Omar Suleiman said recently, the sanctity of just one human life is far greater in importance than any place of worship.
He's right.
How can you expand on this quote and the effects of the loss and trauma on the Palestinian population as a whole, but the youth specifically?
Yes. We build buildings to serve people. It's about the people. Even a mosque, which is thought of as a sacred place. Sacred in what sense? In the sense that people use it for worship. Imagine right now you had one mosque and it was bombed, it was destroyed. On the ground of the mosque, oh, forget about bombed. There was a fire and it was destroyed. So the next day, people go on the grounds of the mosque, they put some rugs and they pray. Where are they praying? They're praying at the mosque. The mosque is not a building. Imagine now there's another mosque in another place, pristine condition, untouched. For whatever reason, nobody goes there. It's useless. It's about people and respect for people's rights and people's dignity, basic human dignity, is one of the highest values. So, frankly, I would love to see those mosques rebuilt. What I bemoan, what bothers me, what makes my heart bleed, are the people who are buried under the rubble of these mosques. So, human life is the higher value that we should be looking at, and we should not be distracted by one building or another. We should focus on the human life. People say, "Oh, they've destroyed this mosque. They've gone too far." No, whoever it is, like in any place on earth, okay, whether India, Rohingya, any place, right? Destroyed them. They've gone too far. No, they went too far when they killed a human being. That's when they went too far. And I believe in the quote by Omar Suleiman. I think it is exactly right, and I think it's a message that we need to be reminded of. It's about people.
So what effect is this? What mental health effect is this going to have on the Palestinian youth? The majority of the population is under 18.
You talk about the destruction of the mosques and places.
Really, destruction of all the infrastructure, the schools as well, the
Yes.
education.
Palestinians have one of the highest literacy rates in the world. They have one of the top two rate of PhDs in the world. They are extremely highly educated. They are people who value education. We had a situation in Yemen when many, many schools were destroyed. People were doing makeshift schools in their homes. We actually have pictures, one of our most beautiful Beitul Mal pictures, we're delivering aid and people in a tent. It's in a tent city. In a tent, they take one tent and they have the little students and the teacher is teaching them. They had their books and they're all laughing. It's a beautiful picture.
Not just one family, like an entire class.
Yeah. It was a whole class in a tent. This was not one family. So the Palestinians, God willing, they will rebuild. The Palestinians, God willing, they will have new schools and there will be newer schools than what was before, more modern hospitals than before. It will take time, it will take effort, but I think they have what it takes to actually rebuild. My worry is not the buildings as much as providing the conditions that allow people to rebuild, such as providing the ability to obtain building materials, the financing so that you are able to rebuild. That's what I worry about. If this is not available, you won't have the school. It'll be difficult. And again, the human element is the most important element. So I think there is going to be a massive negative effect from this war, especially people who are injured, people who saw their parents die in front of them. People, I haven't been there personally, but I have seen the pictures, I have read the stories, and I know from our staff. Some days our staff tells us, we want to deliver aid to a certain place. They say, oh, we can't today. I have to wait the next week. So we wait for a week to be able to deliver the aid because it's just too dangerous. There are people living there. In that danger, there are people who will not go into. So I think the damage is a human damage. Beyond the war, I worry less about the buildings and more about the people. And I hope that we at Beitul Mal and our sister organizations like Zakat Foundation, like the United Muslim Relief, like all sorts of organizations will come together and cooperate to actually rebuild Gaza. There is also damage happening in the West Bank right now and violence in the West Bank. I want people not to forget.
Cannot separate the two.
It's not just that. Sometimes one eclipses the other. So you think, like, why are you delivering aid in the West Bank? All the needs in Gaza. I wish this were true. I really would, and I would deliver all the aid in Gaza. But there is need in the West Bank, and there's clashes, and there are people being killed, and there is, uh, you know, the same situation is in Lebanon. We deliver aid in Lebanon as well.
I think it's a really interesting and hopeful point that you make to not just build Gaza back up, but build it back better. To
Yes.
give the young population and the population as a whole hope for the future, and hopefully also change the legal conditions that keep them in what many people call the open air prison.
Yes.
So, can a resolution be achieved?
Yes.
I know that's a tough
When you
question.
say, so resolution to what?
A resolution that prevents the recurrence of these events. That doesn't
At the
make
moment, it's
Palestinians
far fetched.
homogenous.
See, if you talk about preventing it from happening again, because as long as you have the conflict, as long as you have two different peoples who are fighting over the same land, uh, there is nothing that will prevent this from repeating again, especially that one is very, very well armed. Um, was today is Thursday, 9 days ago, 10 days ago, the United States sent another $1 billion worth of military aid with to the Israelis, which, like, in the middle of this conflict, is not helpful.
Doesn't
So,
exist.
yeah, again, I'm trying to be understated.
Mhm.
It's not my purpose here today to say this side is good and this side is bad. Despite my point here today is to focus on the human condition, and that's why I'm trying to be understated when it comes to things such as the aid. So, no, under the current conditions, I don't think a resolution can happen. The conditions would have to change. And there are only three resolutions I can think of that are actually workable. Now, there never was a two-state solution. There is no possible two-state solution because the conditions of that state makes one of the two states not a state, but a completely occupied place, military and otherwise. So there never was a two-state solution. There are only three possible resolutions to this conflict that I can think of, and I'm not saying that the three are equally desirable. One of them is the Israelis win outright and wipe out the Palestinians, whether they're killed or displaced or permanent minority. One of them is that they are defeated and then they go to, Lithuania and Germany and other places, the United States. And one of them is the one state solution, a state of its people. Not a state for one people where another people are second class, a state of its people that contains the people of Gaza, the West Bank, Jerusalem, and the rest of the historical Palestinian territory. These are the only three resolutions I can think of would result. Clearly, I don't think that they're equally desirable, but one of those three would be some sort of end to the conflict.
There's only so many possibilities.
There's only so many possibilities. The two state solution is not one of them. The two state solution is a very good way to waste time while just things on the ground continue to settle on the ground and you build more settlements and you try to put an edge here and an edge there. But the two-state solution is not a solution. It never was a solution, and no actual policymakers believe that it was ever a solution. This is for people like you and I to, talk about over dinner.
So I have one last point to get to, but before I do, is there anything that you would like listeners and viewers to know about the West Bank that they might not know right now?
There is violence in the West Bank. There continues to be, both in the West Bank as a whole, but also in particular certain places, certain refugee camps for internally displaced people. There is violence there. We have been working in the West Bank for a long time. We actually have in the town of Yazur by the city of Nablus. We have a whole hospital clinic, actually, a whole clinic that we have built and we continue to fund. There is aid that is needed there. I want people to know that the situation in Gaza does not in any way reduce the need in the West Bank. Since October 7th, there has been an uptick in violence in the West Bank. So it's not like constant need and there's always been need. No, there's an uptick.
From both soldiers and settlers, right?
Soldiers and settlers, yeah, both soldiers and settlers.
Right.
And also the numbers of Palestinians who are being detained. I just read a report, I think it was yesterday, saying that there are routine amputations of Palestinians because of damage caused by the handcuffing and the way they are treated while they're being handcuffed. So they break their hands and stuff like that. So are routine amputations. This is not something that I can verify independently through my staff, but situation in the West Bank is not a good situation either. The Israelis at one point threatened to attack the West Bank outright. They didn't carry that through. I hope they don't carry that through, but there is need there also. Also, the delivery of aid to the West Bank is easier than to Gaza. So most of our aid is focused on Gaza right now, but we are able to deliver aid in the West Bank, and there's a much bigger border with Jordan. There is no border with Lebanon, so delivering aid through Lebanon is not an option.
So for a final point, videos have surfaced of Palestinians, both old and young, after losing their entire families, being burned all over, saying things like, all Arab countries have abandoned us, all glory and thanks to Allah. What can you say about the faith and resilience of the Palestinian people and Muslims as a whole?
It is absolutely stunning and inspiring to see a people who, after loss of life and limb, after loss of their children and their property, after loss of their home and being displaced, understanding that there is a greater power, understanding that they are not alone, and putting their hope not in other countries that are unreliable allies, if they are allies, and in some cases they are not allies at all, but putting their hopes in a higher power. Absolutely inspiring. Certainly inspired me personally. I know for sure, seeing online, that has inspired many, many people. But I think that is the power that faith has. It is the ability to transcend the problems of day-to-day life, even though those problems are big. This is not to say that it's easy. And we should not take this to mean that, oh, they don't mind losing their homes. They mind losing their homes. They have spent decades building and improving their homes. So, some people have those traditional family homes. It's a large household with a courtyard with apartments in it. So it'll be the grandfather with all of his children in different houses. It's destroyed. It's been decades. It's been in the family for so long, and the land has been in the family for centuries. Now they have to start from zero. But in the end, it's about people, not about things. And if your heart is strong, you can overcome. The most they can do to you is take your life. And if your value is in the good that you do, in the children that you have raised, then even the loss of life is not the ultimate loss. And if you're only materialistic, and you can only think of things, and the only value you have is what you have eaten and what you have driven, then the loss of life is the ultimate loss. And I think there are people, many of them, they have transcended materialism. And they see that there's something greater. Definitely inspiring to me, especially in this past month of fasting, the month of Ramadan. It's a time where we are closer to our spirituality. It was definitely an inspiring boost, and I think they will continue to inspire. Because when you've gone through this, even when peace comes, the benefit of the experience doesn't go.
Mazin, thank you so much.
And thank you for inviting me.